The women's college basketball tournament has been a really fun and exciting one that's featured a good amount of upsets and also, more importantly, features the Hoosiers in the Sweet 16. To get you guys kind of caught up as to what's been going on in this tournament, we brought on a special guest today to talk all things women's college basketball, from the title favorites to an IU UConn preview to a look at the Bridgeport Regional, everything in between in today's episode.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Thursday, March 24th. This is Locked On Hoosiers, your daily one-stop shop for everything IU athletics, whether it's news, analysis, previews, recaps. We have you guys covered. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. Want to thank you guys for stopping in today and making Locked On Hoosiers part of your day, and more specifically, your first listen every day. Just a reminder, we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where episodes premiere at 7 a.m. there daily. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. As I mentioned, the women's college basketball tournament has been awesome, and it's featured a couple of IU wins. So we brought on special guest Sabrina Merchant of SB Nation. She writes for Swish Appeal, which covers all women's basketball. So she's definitely had her eye on everything going on in the women's tournament. And we ask her a lot of questions about it and get her thoughts on this IU team and this IU program and what their chances are against UConn as well. So before we jump into that, as always, you can subscribe to Locked On Hoosiers wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Hoosiers and on Instagram at Locked On Hoosiers. And with all that being said, let's get to our conversation with Sabrina. And now, as promised, joining me from SB Nation Swish Appeal, Sabrina Merchant, covering all things women's basketball over there. Sabrina, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Super fun tournament weekend. Excited for the 2 days off before it starts again.
I was talking to somebody earlier, and this is the first day in a week that there hasn't been some type of college basketball game. It feels weird today because IU literally started their men's tournament on Tuesday, and IU's women's team finished on Monday. So it was 7 straight days of college basketball. I love it, though. This is my
disrespect for the NIT, Jacob. Come on.
No, I said what I said. You didn't have to worry about the NIT this year, so it doesn't exist. But I mean, I would have absolutely paid attention to it if they were in it, like it looked like they were going to be. But women's tournament has been really awesome too. Stressful for IU fans on Monday, but it's been a blast of a tournament to watch. Just what have been your thoughts so far on this women's tournament?
I came into it thinking that it's about time for the women to play the first 2 rounds on neutral sites as well. And then just the environment in Iowa and in Connecticut and South Carolina and like Stanford. I mean, maybe it's just more fun to have as many games in home sites as possible. And maybe it's just a good reward if you're one of the top 16 teams in the country to be like, hey, yeah, we get to play 2 more games at home because we were that good during the regular season and we deserve it. And it's been really fun just to watch these atmospheres. And then, I mean, during the Sweet 16, we still got 5 games where the home team lost on their, to a lower seeded team. So it's not like upsets are out of the question. I mean, I think it's much harder for like a 13 to 16 seed to commit an upset in the first round. But so long as we're getting like competitive matchups throughout, I don't really have any problem with the home court. So I've kind of completely done a 180 and realized that, hey, I like home court matchups even in the theoretically neutral site NCAA tournament, and I'm glad that the women's tournament gives us an opportunity to see that in action.
Yeah, that's a thought I had watching IU last night. Is I think it'd be awesome. Like, I don't think the NCAA would ever do it because it probably doesn't make them as much money, but I have loved the it's like you said, it's a huge added bonus for being a top 4 seed that you get to host all this. But it's such a cool atmosphere to have a home game that means that much. Like it means whether you're going to the Sweet 16 or not.
Right.
And it created really odd, not even just IU. Iowa was like a crazy atmosphere, but then to your point, Creighton still came in and beat them
Exactly.
and had the upset.
Yeah, just like there's 16 games in that round of 32, and 5 of them ended in upsets, which I think is it's pretty good, all things considered, because they would all be underdogs because they're all the lower seeds, and they all managed to figure it out anyway. I mean, sometimes you get like those creative regional assignments where like Belmont gets to play at the University of Tennessee's home court, and it's like kind of a home game for them against Oregon too, even though they were the 12 seed. But yeah, it was just so much fun. There was so much good stuff like just all around the country. I know like the 116 games were always a bit of a joke, but like there was so much just competitive basketball all throughout. I mean, I think this whole myth of like parity not existing on the women's side is wildly overblown, and like we had 8 double-digit seeds win games in the first 2 rounds, which tied a tournament record. I mean, and this close to like Princeton, unfortunately, adding to that, or even like who else was really close? I mean, Belmont so close to beating Tennessee as well. So just a lot of fun. I mean, I think what's interesting is that I'm not even sure that there is a clear-cut favorite at the moment either, which I thought was going to be the case with South Carolina coming into this weekend. But like they kind of forgot how to play offense over the last 2 weeks, and that is somewhat important to winning basketball games. So I think the field is even more open than expected, and there's just so many interesting matchups heading into next weekend. Like I can't even pick a favorite.
Yeah, Villanova was for a lot of that game against Michigan too. I watched a bit of it, was right there with them. And yeah, that Indiana game we'll talk about here in a bit, but that got really hairy there at the end of it. I do think the upsets are for the I don't even know how to word this. For the casual fan is maybe the complaint that they had about the women's tournament, but they were all over the place. And I thought it was really cool just to have a women's game on ABC on Sunday. I think
multiple.
but the Iowa game specifically to see Caitlin Clark like on that stage, and then it's to see Creighton win. I had somebody kind of phrase it like it's maybe a short-term loss for this tournament that you don't get Caitlin Clark through the rest of the tournament, but like kind of long-term, it might be better to see upsets are actually a thing in women's college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first year that they've been allowed to use the March Madness moniker, and lo and behold, it's like actually madness on the women's side of things.
That's the only reason that there wasn't madness beforehand, I guess, is that name was left out. On the note of Iowa, I was a little worried about the Big Ten after the men's just kind of flamed out across the board. Women's teams, it wasn't a great start between Iowa losing was the big one. Nebraska lost in the first round as well. But ultimately, the Big Ten has 4 of the 16 remaining teams left. I guess what have you thought about how the Big Ten has showed in this tournament?
So I'm not sure if I'm the right person to have brought onto this podcast because I am a Big Ten hater by definition and normally pick my brackets by just, hedging against the Big Ten at all possible.
I mean, it's fair.
outcomes.
I mean, look at the men's side. You would have done really well.
I am not doing as well on the women's side, I got to tell you.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the knock on the Big Ten all season was like, is this defense going to hold up against, the rest of the competition? And we saw that Ohio State easily able to contain LSU and Maryland. Like, were they even contested at all during those first 2 games? I mean, no. Florida Gulf Coast wins like maybe the game of the tournament so far against Virginia Tech, and then it's just run out of the building against Maryland 2 days later. I thought Michigan, maybe they haven't had to face the toughest of competition yet, but, still looked really good in that second half against Villanova. They just had no way of containing Naz Hillman. And now they get South Dakota, which I'm fascinated by because South Dakota has done an awesome job of containing really strong scoring centers so far in Shakira Austin and Melissa Smith, and now they get Naz. So another delicious matchup there. But like to get 4 out of the 16 Sweet 16 teams, like that's easily punching above your weight. And I know like most people didn't consider the Big Ten to be the best conference in college basketball this year, but Maryland, for my money, is like the most dangerous looking team right now, even if they do have to face Stanford in the next round, which, dear God, like that could be a final, and that's a Sweet 16 game that's coming up this weekend. So yeah, as far as like best title odds, like maybe you'd still have to consider the ACC because they have NC State and Louisville, but no, it's been a really nice showing for the conference. I mean, they definitely showed up better than the Big 12, that's for damn sure.
Yeah. And yeah, Maryland's been such a weird team at times this year. I know they've had a bunch of injuries, but their ceiling's really high and their floor's been kind of low at times. But fortunately, it looks like they're much closer to their ceiling right now through the tournament. So your bracket's busted, you and everyone else. Don't worry, we believe in second chances, and so do your friends at Run Your Pool. Round up your friends who picked Baylor, Kentucky, or any other high seed to win it, and start a Sweet 16 pool at runyourpool.com/lockedon. Along with Sweet 16 brackets, Run Your Pool offers squares pools, yes, just like the Super Bowl, to keep things interesting every week of the tournament. Brackets busted, but the fun doesn't have to stop. They have the options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks, all stuff you aren't going to find at big media bracket sites. If you're looking to expand your horizons, Run Your Pool has games for just about every sport, including NBA, PGA, MLB, even the Oscars. Once the madness ends, try something new. Plus, they offer full white glove customer support, custom branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups you'll ever find. Clearly, we believe in Run Your Pool because we're running Survivor and bracket contests there this year ourselves. Start your second chance, Sweet 16 pool, and more at runyourpool.com/lockedon. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon. Now, as we just said, if you guys took Kentucky, you took Baylor, you took Iowa in either the men's or women's tournament, your bracket's busted. Mine's not looking too good, but I still got some cash for my StatHero Pick'em. If you haven't checked out this new platform, you're really missing out. StatHero's NCAA single game Pick'ems pit the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. StatHero gives you the advantage, resulting in their gamers winning 4 times more often. Why? Because StatHero eliminates the mystery about who or what you are going up against. In addition to their pick'em games, they also have dozens of lineups you can comb through to take on head-to-head. They simply post a set of players for you to take on with a set of players that you choose. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy is meant to be, guys. So sign up for free right now at stathero.com/lockedon and use the promo code LOCKEDON for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/lockedon. Use promo code LOCKEDON for a 100% match. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks again, guys, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Now let's throw this back to our conversation with Sabrina as we talk a little bit more about the IU Hoosiers. Let's dive into this Indiana team. This Indiana-Princeton game that, about midway through the third quarter, they go up 14 points. I kind of relaxed. And then
so did Indiana.
Yeah, this Princeton team that was a frustrating game to play because they just did not quit the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how they wore down Kentucky, too, in the first round. It's just they work basically for all 30 seconds of the shot clock on offense. They make you defend for all 30 seconds. And the minute that there's an opening on that defense, they make you pay with, one of those back cuts, just classic Princeton offense. And then the fact that they have Caitlin Chen, who can beat you off the dribble, and Abby Myers, who's obviously such a talented scorer. Yeah, I remember we were messaging during the first quarter and you're like, this is going to be a frustrating game. I'm like, yeah, that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
Even when you thought we were getting comfortable, it just was never going to happen. But I was just so impressed by the poise of Indiana, with Princeton coming back and taking the lead in the fourth quarter. Just the way Grace Berger is able to get to any spot she wants to on the floor, and her ability to maintain her own pace even when the game sort of speeds up is really, really impressive. And then having Mackenzie Holmes back, just I keep thinking about like how Indiana is seated where they are because Mackenzie Holmes was missing for so much of the Big Ten season. And like maybe they're even underseated because when you have just that dump off option in the post, someone that has to be guarded like in the dunker spot. I mean, that was sort of what happened on that final game-winning basket against Princeton was that the defender was unwilling to leave Holmes, and that gave Berger just that limited extra space that she needed to finish that layup. Just another rebounder in the middle. I mean, I thought it was a really good win for Indiana. Like, yeah, it'd be nice if they could have won by like 31 like Michigan. I'm sorry, like Maryland did, but survive in advance, right? That's just all you got to do.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said in the recap episode. That was kind of the epitome of a survive in advance game there at the very end. Just do what had to be done. But Mackenzie Holmes has been kind of a lot of the topic of conversation since she's been back because Indiana was clearly a good team without her. They were still a tournament team, but if they want to kind of meet their goals of a Final Four, you needed the Mackenzie Holmes that was there before the injury back. And the little bit of time she had off between the end of the regular season and then the Big Ten tournament, you could see there was a difference. The time they've had off since the 2 weeks they had off between the Big Ten tournament and the NCAA tournament, she looks fully back at this point, which kind of raises the ceiling, I think, of this IU team. Just what do you think in general? What's just kind of your perception of an IU program that has really had a big turnaround in the last 4 or 5 years to be where they're at now?
Yeah, I mean, I got to admit, I wasn't really paying attention until was that game against who did they play in the Elite Eight last year?
NC State.
Oh no, they beat NC State to get to the Elite Eight, right?
Oh, Arizona.
And then they got Arizona. Yeah. Which Arizona just has a fantastic way of mucking things up. That was a just magical Wildcat run there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, defensively, they're just so solid. Like I love watching a team that like can still play attractive basketball while defending well. Like it's a very delicate balance to strike. And I think Indiana manages it because they have, players who can still get their own shot while like also just squeezing the life out of opposing teams' offenses. Like I loved watching Nicole Cardano-Hillary play this year. And I think watching her guard like Paige Beckers next week is going to be tremendous fun. And then she also had like that super sweet reverse finish in the fourth quarter against Princeton the other night. So like, I mean, get you a girl who can do it all. Like that's the ideal. But my sensibilities as a basketball watcher tends towards like I like to root for teams that can actually get a stop, and that's what makes Indiana so pleasant to watch. Is that like, oh, you can count on them to bunker down and like, slow the game down and just take care of possessions, and that's what's I think most impressive about this particular Hoosier squad.
Yeah, they've been able to do that pretty much throughout the whole season. The offense has come and go at times. The defense is, I mean, that's kind of how the adage is, but the defense has been there throughout most of the year. There were a couple of Iowa games at the end of the regular season where they speed everybody up. And
Zanana is a tough cover.
yeah. She was uncoverable in all 3 games that IU had against her. But IU got sped up in a couple of those games. But even in that Big Ten championship game, IU slowed them down and played it at their tempo. It was just Sonano was, again, unstoppable. And I think she had 30 points in that Big Ten championship game. But
I felt bad for her against Creighton because they were like +8 when she was on the court and then still lost.
Yeah. And she got hers in that one. And she's incredible. Like I was terrified by the time Indiana played them in the Big Ten final because they just don't have an answer for her. There aren't many people. There isn't really anybody that has an answer for her in the country. I mean, the big like factor in this turnaround has been Terry Morin, who came in, and Indiana now has 8 NCAA tournament wins, and she has 7 of them. And just as an idea of how responsible she's been for this turnaround. Again, just kind of a broader question, but I mean, what's just kind of your thoughts on what she's been able to do for this program?
Yeah, I mean, I was unaware of that. So I guess big picture, we're not really talking about Indiana women's basketball if it's not for Terry Morin. So that's That's pretty impressive. 7 out of 8. Wow, that's a lot. Um, I mean, I guess you have to start with like recruiting, right? Like this is just
Mhm.
a really talented bunch, and I don't think they're going to play for some random coach who hasn't had a track record of success. So like you look at Indiana's roster, and it's not like they're working from. It's not like they're this like underdog crew that's playing above its weight or anything. Like there's a lot of talent on this team. I mean, like even when Mackenzie Holmes was out, Moore McNeil had a nice stretch there, and like she had some really important minutes in the first half against Princeton too. So like this is a good set of players that they're working with, and a lot of that comes down to just being able to recruit, and you can't do that unless you have a respected head of the program. So I think that's a big part of it. And then like this conference, like I know I was making fun of it earlier, but like there's a lot of good teams in this conference, and to be able to compete, with the Marylands and the Michigans and the Iowas of the world, like that's no small feat. So yeah, that's wow, 7 out of 8. I'm just like still processing that's the history of what Indiana was dealing with before she got there. Like that's like not even a program. That's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's never been women's basketball in Indiana for just as big as the men's basketball program has been during the Bob Knight days and whatnot. The women's program just wasn't like up to par in any way, shape, or form. And it wasn't until she got in here that, and ironically, she's a Purdue grad too, and comes to Indiana. She actually has a clause in her contract that for her to ever leave to go to Purdue, Purdue would have to pay some exorbitant amount of money to get her out of the contract. But yeah, she came in, and I think it was 5 years ago, either 4 or 5 years ago, that they won the women's NIT, and I cared about the NIT then.
I am fascinated by that NIT to NCAA jump. Like, I think it's so important for some programs when they don't have a history of success to just be able to compete in that single elimination environment. Like, so I mean, I'm a Duke alum, and our team willingly decided not to go to the NIT this year. And the rumor was that, like, because so many of the students are grad students, they had like a heavy business school course load and were like unwilling to participate in the NIT, which is so freaking frustrating. But like, I mean, these types of runs in the NCAA tournament, I think, are direct results of just being able to play March basketball. Like we saw it with Arizona last year. Like they had an NIT run just a couple years before that, and like every single one of them, from like Ari and Kate Reese and Adia Barnes, were all just like, yeah, being able to just be in that single elimination type of game is so important. So that's interesting that Indiana also comes from that background.
Yeah, the women's NIT is also just really fascinating, I guess. You have to pay to be in it in each level, like in each round. Like Indiana's athletic department was just kind of open about it. Like this is a really talented team. At the time, it was the best team Indiana ever had, and they just said we're gonna front the money and we're gonna pay for them to keep playing as long as they go. And they ended up hosting the NIT championship game, and it was a sold out arena. It was a big moment, and they come away victors. And as you said, Allie Patberg was on that team. She's been around.
How long has Allie Patberg been in Indiana? I'm
Uh,
sorry.
she at Indiana specifically
It's been like
is
7 years.
yeah. She was at Notre Dame for a couple years and then has come to Indiana. They mentioned during the Big Ten tournament, she talked about she had played some games here. You have to go back to like 2013 to find her high school games
Oh my
because
God.
she's a seventh year senior. It's funny, the story of her coming back this year is that she had kind of I believe she took part in senior day last year, and everything ended, and she came to Coach Morn and said, "Hey, do you want me back if I come back? Like I want to come back. Do you want me?" Coach Morn was like, "Yes, absolutely. What do you mean? Yeah, we want you back." So yeah, she's been around forever, but that was the year she had to sit out for transferring from Notre Dame. Was the year Indiana won the NIT tournament. So it's interesting. It wasn't an aspect I had realized in the past, just that NIT to NCAA jump. But for a program like Indiana that had literally no NCAA success, to have a March run like that, it kind of took the program up a level in some ways and kind of set a bar. And yeah, they've just been clearing it about every year since then, setting a new bar and a new bar. I guess kind of on that note, what is the ceiling do you see for this IU team now that it seems like everybody's healthy and they're playing at this level?
Well, I mean, they haven't had the best wins this season, right? Like they've done a
Yeah,
really good job of taking care of every team that they're supposed to beat. Like there are not a lot of bad losses on the IU ledger. I don't think there are like really any bad losses on the IU ledger.
Nebraska was the worst loss, and that's a
Yeah, like they
tournament
lost
game.
to Stanford by 3, right? They
Yeah,
lost to NC State also within 10 points. They lost, games in the Big Ten to like Iowa, Maryland, Michigan. Like none of those are bad losses, but at the same time, like what's like that marquee win that sort of convinces you like that they've taken the next step? Um, that's sort of where I am. Like I could see them beating Connecticut just because I'm not super impressed with Connecticut thus far, but like NC State I think is better than they were last year. And I mean if they get past Notre Dame, obviously, but like I'm just not sure I see IU quite beyond the Elite Eight yet, because I mean they just haven't done it yet, right?
Mhm.
So I don't want to like come on the show and be a downer. I apologize, Jacob.
No, you're
But
fine. I mean, I don't disagree. This is a tough matchup for this UConn game alone. I'm not even sure that I wouldn't imagine they're even going to be favorites in it. So you guys hear me mention them all the time, but Built Bar is the go-to right now because they're helping me keep my New Year's resolutions, mainly because they taste so damn good. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Again, 100% real chocolate. They taste exactly like candy bars, but they're so much better for you. They're low in calorie, high in protein, high in fiber, low in carbs. You can replace your candy bars with these. They're going to be better for you. They're going to taste as good too because Built Bar has so many flavors, whether it's mint brownie, whether it's coconut almond, cookies and cream, raspberry. They have everything you guys could imagine. They have limited time flavors coming out all the time as well. Built Bar, they're all about taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. I don't know how they do it, but they always pull it off. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Let's get back to this conversation with Sabrina and talk about the Hoosiers, UConn, and this really enticing Bridgeport region. Just kind of shifting to previewing that game. I mean, I joke that I and probably many other IU fans have watched one half of UConn basketball, and it was after the IU game last night.
right.
But I mean, you mentioned the Paige Beckers, Nicole Cardano, Hillary matchup that we're all excited to see. What is it that you're going to kind of be watching in this game?
I mean, just first of all, like, how in the world are they playing in Bridgeport again? Like, I looked at the last 10 years of NCAA tournaments, okay? And Bridgeport has been a regional host 4 times, all right? And one of the years, Kingston, Rhode Island was a host, which is basically 45 minutes away from University of Connecticut. So they, within the last 10 years, 5 of the regionals have been in their backyard, like which is unreasonable. Like I guess that Spokane comes second; they have 4, but like the University of Washington is not some women's basketball powerhouse that like we're worried about, sending the Huskies there every year. Like, it just doesn't seem fair to me that so many times Bridgeport is hosting this. Like, I get it, Connecticut's like this hotbed of women's basketball, like because of the Huskies, but like maybe if you started hosting the tournament, like I don't know, in Illinois a little bit more often, like people would want to watch there. But anyway, setting aside the fact that this is basically a road game for Indiana against Connecticut, and if you watch the second half of UCF versus Connecticut, like it was clear that that Gamble crowd makes a difference. Like that is a good basketball crowd. And Paige is the type of player in particular who definitely gets hyped up by playing at home. And she's played, I think I can count the number of games on one hand that she's played in front of a home crowd because of the pandemic and the fact that she was injured for most of the season. So that's something that would worry me just a little bit, as an Indiana fan. But the number one thing is that UConn is just tough as nails defensively, right? Like they don't switch. They just play really strict man. They pressure you. And it is very hard to get into your actions against Connecticut. So having just like a consistent shot maker like Berger is super important because the beautiful offense, like I feel like Princeton would just get running the muck against Connecticut because not only do they defend you really well, they just have a horde of athletes. So their size is really impressive at every position. They've got Nika Mule, the Defensive Player of the Year in the Big East. They've got Olivia Nelson-Ododa in the middle, who just is a presence, and Aaliyah Edwards. And like Paige is not someone that can just be taken advantage of defensively either. So Kristen Williams, like Westbrook, there's just a lot of perimeter and interior talent defensively. So this is the kind of game where I think IU's just going to have to hit some shots. Like, I don't expect them to be able to run beautiful basketball. Like, it's going to get ugly. But having just someone who can create their own space, which, again, super important that Berger's that kind of player, is going to be really helpful. And then if you can just get their bigs into foul trouble, like, just get a couple early ones on Edwards or Ono, that's where Mackenzie Holmes really comes into play, because UCF, like, I think they thought their advantage would come inside with, like, Masini Kaba, but, like, the UCF bigs just got, like, roasted on, like, fouls. So the problem is that they didn't have the size to contend with Connecticut. I think that might be something that could work to Indiana's advantage if they just get the ball into the post as much as possible, because Connecticut doesn't really have, like, an interior scoring presence, so you might be able to get away with, like, some defensively challenged bigs in that area. But just bullying them inside could be helpful, because, again, they just have so many athletes on the wing and the perimeter, and their defense is really, really impressive.
Yeah, it was startling looking at their roster, kind of starting to research this team and look into this game, because it's just 6'5", 6'5", 6'5", 6'3", and it's like IU has Mackenzie Holmes is 6'3", and she's the tallest player that actually plays on the roster, and it's just like, man, where did all this size come from, and can IU borrow some? Because it's going to be fascinating, because Mackenzie Holmes is someone that they typically like to kind of establish early, and it's going to be a challenge to do that against a UConn team with as much size, and it could be a kind of an early determining factor if one side gets into foul trouble, because IU doesn't have a ton of depth. They have 6 really good players, but they just basically have 6 players, and once you get past that, it gets interesting. So foul trouble is always kind of a concern with Indiana, because they just don't have the depth to really absorb that. Looking to the other matchup in this region, NC State, Notre Dame, I still can't get over the fact that Notre Dame won by 44.
It was incredible.
In the game against Oklahoma.
A road game, too.
Yeah, in Oklahoma, and just every stat I saw from that game was just staggering. Like, all the records they broke, all it was like the largest victory by a lower seed ever, which naturally, like, nobody aside from the 1 seeds in the first round win by 44 points. So, like,
I mean, some teams are not putting up 44 points in this tournament.
No. UCF and UConn barely did that last night. You can add their point totals up, and it doesn't equal the 108 that Notre Dame dropped in that one. So, I mean, Notre Dame is clearly riding high going into this one. What are you looking for in that game then?
So Notre Dame is actually the only ACC team to defeat NC State all year, which ironically gives me a little bit more pause about this matchup, because it's the kind of thing where if you're a Wolfpack player, you're not just willingly going to sit down for this one. Like, this is one you really get up for, because it's the Sweet 16 and it's a team that prevented your unblemished ACC season. But I mean, the numbers may not look like it, but NC State's been playing really well. They're just kind of a slow starting team, but once they get into it, they just completely turn it on. I mean, their best player is Elisa Kunin, and like, she barely played against Kansas State in the second round, and they still just slaughtered them because her backup, Camille Hobby, for some reason, like, had no problem posting up against a zone, like, which really shouldn't be happening. But they're just a phenomenal 3-point shooting team. Reina Perez is absolutely on fire. And like, to have that depth where, your best player has to sit with 2 fouls almost immediately and you just don't lose a beat is really impressive. The thing with the Notre Dame-Oklahoma matchup is that Oklahoma is an offensive, fast-paced team, and they unfortunately let Notre Dame play exactly how they want. NC State can play like that, but they can also slow it down. So I think that's going to be the game plan, where you hold on to the ball and you're going to work the shot clock as much as possible, because Notre Dame gets going in transition. Olivia Miles is one of, like, the very best orchestrators on the break that I've seen all season, and she's a freshman for Notre Dame, which is crazy to think about. And then you just have to guard the line well because like every single Mabry who walks through the Notre Dame like institution just is immediately able to splash threes at a moment's notice. Uh, I would still favor NC State in that one because I think their success is a little more sustainable. Like they're not just completely dependent on a hot shooting night, which when it looks good, it looks really good for Notre Dame. But I just think it's really hard to beat a team twice in the same season. And I'm kind of surprised that there are two ACC teams this early on the bracket. Like I thought they usually save those for the regional finals. But I think NC State is just one, like supremely disappointed with how last season ended, which obviously Indiana is very familiar with, and two, supremely disappointed with having lost to Notre Dame earlier this year. I don't even think they've played their best to date in this tournament, and like just this slow build makes me think that they're gonna be ready for what Notre Dame wants to do. Like the fact that they've already seen them earlier this season. No one on Notre Dame can stop Cunane. Like I know Maya Dotson had a good time, like just intercepting Oklahoma passes left and right because they were literally throwing the ball all around the gym. I don't think that's going to happen with NC State. And, we could easily be in for a rematch between NC State and Indiana. I would not be surprised by that at all.
Yeah, pretty much any matchup you come up with in this region has some type of fun storyline, whether it's like NC State IU, which I would be petrified of because, as you said, NC State is 100% up for that matchup and wanting revenge, even after beating IU during the regular season.
Really good this year. Like to have one of the best centers in the country and then also shoot 36% on threes. Like it's just a tough thing to guard.
Yeah, they're incredible. They were incredible in Assembly Hall as well. You have IU Notre Dame as the best team in Indiana, or you have either of those schools against UConn with all the rivalries,
right.
Kind of traditional powers going on there. So it's a fascinating region with lots of.
I guess we're just not rooting for NC State UConn because that has no fun stories attached to it.
No, it doesn't. But we wouldn't be rooting for UConn anyway. I guess the fact that it's kind of the NC State's kind of one of the current top programs against. UConn's always a measuring stick for women's basketball. That's what
28 straight Sweet 16s is insane. Like just count those wins. 2 times 28. That's 56 wins in the tournament, and IU has 8 total.
Yeah, I couldn't even wrap my head around some of the stats. They haven't lost. They've won 25 straight games against Big Ten teams. That's dating back to, I believe it was 2004 against Michigan State. And just like the level of success, I couldn't even wrap my head around at the 28 straight Final Fours is just, Sweet 16.
They beat Mercer 83-38 in the first round, and it was the first time that they hadn't scored 100 points in the opening round since 2015. Like that was a bad game for them to win 83-38. And against UCF, when they were trailing after the first quarter, it was the first time in like 20 some home games that they'd been trailing after the first quarter, which is.
I was looking. IU hasn't even scored 100 points this season. I didn't think they had, and
it's just not their style.
Yeah. It was the Iowa games the only time they came close, and they needed a 42-point fourth quarter to even do that one. So, it's going to be interesting. I kind of equate it to how college football fans always say we want Bama, that we want UConn. There's never going to be I don't think a better chance for IU to beat them than with the best team in program history versus a UConn team that is a little bit down. They haven't really got things going until the latter part of the season. So I'm cautiously optimistic. You mentioned earlier, just kind of looking big picture at the whole field in the Sweet 16. Who are you kind of pegging as the favorites left in this tournament?
I think Stanford and Maryland have actually looked the best of any two teams so far. And again, one of them is going to be gone by Friday, which I just cannot believe. The South Carolina-North Carolina matchup is really fun to me, especially because it's in Greensboro. Just to be in that building would be delightful. I'm so jealous of everyone who gets to be in North Carolina for that. To think, you're South Carolina, you're the number 1 seed, you got your relatively local region in Greensboro, and then this freaking North Carolina Tar Heels come in, and they're playing really well. Deja Kelly looked awesome against Arizona. that's a fun matchup. I just kind of want to see if South Dakota can keep doing it. Like they haven't trailed in this tournament, which
Unbelievable.
it's crazy. Yeah. So those are some teams I'm keeping an eye on. The Wichita region just makes no sense to me whatsoever, but that's where I'm looking.
It's going to be a fun one. Hopefully, it continues into an exciting second weekend of action here. Hopefully, it's at least one IU win. If they beat UConn, then I will have plenty to brag about. IU beat UConn, and I will be on cloud nine. I won't even have to think about anything else the rest of this year. But Sabrina, appreciate it a ton for you coming on and talking women's basketball with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Jacob.
One more time, big thank you to Sabrina for coming on and sharing a ton of thoughts on this tournament. That's been a ton of fun to watch. Now that the men's team is out of the tournament, flip on over to the women's tournament and catch some really fun, really exciting games. You won't regret it. It's a ton of fun to watch these women play. We'll be back tomorrow with a preview of the UConn game exclusively and this UConn team with another guest. So be sure to check that one out. Thank you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, head on over to the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. Your host, Ryan Tracy, and former NFL quarterback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Appreciate all the love you guys give us constantly. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. Subscribe to the podcast and leave a quick rating and review. Helps us out a ton. Most importantly, though, guys, have a great Thursday and Elio.